McGregor, affectionately known to her students as Miss Mac. She is an award-winning educator, author, consultant, publisher, and CSCOPE researcher. She is also the founder and director of Horizons Academy in San Angelo, Texas, from 1990 through 2002, and CEO of Mac Math Inc. out of Bradely-currently, Texas. Ms. Mac will be presenting the most up-to-date information about what is being taught in our public schools through CSCOPE, which, as we all know, is billed as a comprehensive online curriculum management system for grades K through 12. Ms. Mac.
Thank y'all very much. Appreciate it. I'd like to take a few moments for us to remember the victims of the Boston Marathon, and also the people in West Texas and all of the people that were involved in helping both of those. I'm here in front of you not because of my design. I am here because of divine intervention. As I told God several times, I don't want this fight. I want someone else to take it. Then I'd wake up the next morning and I said, well, I'll live through another day, so I'll go another step. I have not had threats against me, but someone did something to my pickup. They ran into it, caved in the side of it sometime. Lucky enough, it was a place that was already kind of dented in, so I just grabbed it. It was a real bad accident. But I don't feel threatened by anything because I believe that the message that I have for you doesn't come from me. It was about 4 years ago, after my research on accelerated learning, that I was at a conference. And I had several teachers come up after because they knew my reputation for research and said, Ms. Mac, would you look into this thing called CSCOPE? And I said, okay, I'll be more than happy to do that for you. Tell me something about it. Well, we can't. Well, your first reaction was the fact that they probably didn't know much about it, but the reason was they couldn't because they were not allowed to. So I went back and I looked into it, and as a researcher who's supposed to remain objective and not emotionally attached to anything, I looked at something and I thought, well, you're looking at this wrong. Surely you're seeing it different. And I find another piece of information that said, surely you're looking at this wrong. Look at it from a different position. And as I was going through it, I was appalled about what I was finding. And I said, well, this is too big for me. I've got to have some help. So I took what I had and I went to Austin. And this was about 3 years ago. And I knocked on doors and I went to the state board members. I went around to my representatives. I said, somebody needs to look into this. And nobody gave me the time of day. Now, it wasn't because they were not concerned. It was because they didn't know anything about it either. There was no public uproar. There was no knowledge out there about it. So I decided that I'd done all I could and I put it on the shelf. And then one day, about a year ago, sitting there in the van, I said, I wonder what's going on about CSCOPE. I Googled it. I found a lady who had the audacity to list her phone number who had also been looking into it. And from that, it went into about 4 veteran teachers across the state of Texas who had independently been looking into CSCOPE and were concerned about it. Each of us had been looking into a different aspect of it, and then our paths crossed all at one time. Because of my reputation in research, and that comes from the fact that I was a pre-med major and went to medical school, and instead of going into medical school, I did research for Texas Tech and learned quite a bit. I got my degree in education on the side because I thought, well, shoot, I'll have a high-paid job later on in life. But I took that research and then took it to the field of education and formed this school that I had in San Angelo, Texas, and took whoever walked through the door on accelerated learning, and you'll see some of the kids from that in just a minute. But because of that aspect of looking into things and the reputation that I had up until then, I got a call and they said, do you know something about CSCOPE? And I said, well, I've looked into it. We would like an extensive investigation. I said, okay. Now, I'm a classic overachiever. I look at everything upside down, inside out, and all around. So I did that. I put together, looked at every dissertation that was written about it. I looked at every news article written about it. I looked into the legal communications between TES, CCC, the owners of CSCOPE. I looked into their bylaws, the corporation. I read the blogs. I looked into every little piece I could find. I put it together. I sourced everything. I did not have my name on it. There was no interpretation. There was no bias in interpretation. And I turned that report in. The report made itself to Austin, the state board. Some of the members got to see it. The governor, I think, got to see it, and the commissioner. And I said, I've done my job. Then I was called to testify. So I went before the state board. I did that. I've done my job. Then I was called before the Senate Education Committee. I did that. And then I've done my job. And then again, 2 weeks ago, before the Senate Education Committee again. This is not about me. I've already heard that it's about me. That I'm out here to scare you, that I'm out here to sell my products or my services to you, and that I have a hidden agenda. I can guarantee you that I do not. I wish that you would take this problem from me and move forward with it, and then I can go back to do what I like, writing books to help children learn at an accelerated level. So I am not the expert. I don't know if you can see the screen or not. I apologize for that. I generally have a dark background, and we'll find out if this works. So let's hear from the experts. This is my son. He's back from Iraq. Because of him and his training in intelligence, he has helped me look into CSCOPE a little bit. He's critiqued some of the work that I've done. My research started with my son. After the doctor said I couldn't have any children, then I got pregnant. And here he was. Taught him to read at the age of 7 months. By the time he was 11 months, he could read. He, in his, I guess it was freshman year in high school, won 8 Who's Who's awards. At age 16, he worked for NASA as an intern. He's a mild-mannered kid, loves life, loves learning. He goes over to Iraq after quitting at UT, but at quitting UT on his astrophysics degree, he went into the Army and did 2 tours of duty. Helped catch the number 2 bad guy, by the way, with your tax dollar money. He's using equipment that he can't even talk to me about, so we should be proud of that. But it's because of him and the way that he learned, because when I was trying to get services for him as a parent in school, I was told I didn't know what you're talking about, you're just a mom. And then I found out that the problem that he had getting into the program he wanted was because the school was mishandling funds. And when I delved into that, I caught them red-handed. I had them. I could have sued them big time. They had actually forged his papers. And in doing so, and the reason I'm telling you this story, was because we went back and he decided not to make a trouble for the taxpayer, but we asked them to re-evaluate every child that had been denied the program he had been denied. And they had, I think, another 20 the next year that were allowed to go in. So this is my challenge to you as a parent. When you think you're not doing enough, you model what is in your heart and your value system. The other reason that I'm here today is his grandfather, who won the same award in the same Army post that he won his award, identical award, 3 generations apart, was one of the quietest Christians I ever knew. And because of that quiet Christianity, I did not know about his attributes until his last year of life, when I was asked to write an article about him. And because of my father saying, always seek the truth, no matter what and no matter who it is that stands up to you. Thank you, Stuart. This is Anthony. Anthony knows Stuart, by the way. Anthony here is a pre-K student who's done 30 division problems in 80 seconds. He's a pre-K student. This is Audric, who completed 5.5 years of math in 12 months. Both of these kids topped out in the national norm test, 1%. We have 2 kids, Emily, who did 1 year of math in 1 month, and Elizabeth, a pre-K student who did 1 grade in 3 months. And this is the story that was sent to you. But the story is the courage to give, and we still can't read it. Can you read it? No.
But here's the third page of it. It's astounding because it has to do with a child who's written a 3-page paper that when I've turned it in to other teachers, they'll say, that's a great page. That's a great story for a fourth grader to write. She happens to be a kindergarten student. Now, all of these students have nothing different than the students that are in your school district. They just happen to have the opportunities and the tools to use God-given potential. And that's what I want for all children. So this is called the Texas method, the liberty to learn. Texas is called the Lone Star State. We are of an independent spirit. We depend on and honor individual merit. And we have self-initiation, responsibility, and we believe in exceptionalism and high achievement. This is your God-given opportunity to fight for your child's success. So that's what my message is to you. This is not about me. This is not even about CSCOPE. This is about you taking back local control and taking back the academic health of your child and having that ownership back again, whether you're a Stuart, an Audric, an Anthony, or an Elizabeth. So this is my suggestion to use the 3-prong approach. We all have similar values. That's why we're here. But if you can get 2 other people in you who have values alike, and you join together, and you do everything in 3, and you keep a logbook by your phone, you can do 3 activities from 3 emails, 3 phone calls. You can do it 3 times a day, and you can make 3 contacts, whether they're 3 officials, 3 parents, 3 ministers, whomever, and you'll make a tremendous difference. If you do that less than 3 minutes, 3 times a week with 3 people, you will have made contact to 81 different entities with less than 30 minutes of energy expended for the month total. CSCOPE or CSCAM, education without representation. CSCOPE has never gone through intense Texas Tech book optional adoption process in which public hearings are held and factual errors are documented and discussed. This is by Dr. Linda Villarreal, one of the CSCOPE directors. We make no promise this curriculum will help students do better. CSCOPE has never gone through any public hearings and never has gone independent peer review. Great teachers hate CSCOPE, good teachers hate CSCOPE, so teachers just usually do whatever keeps the kids busy. 2-time award-winning Teacher of the Year quits out in Ector County. She said that she's not heard good things from her fellow teachers who share. CSCOPE does not create good teaching in anyone who thinks should not be in education. Now, the reason that these quotes that I'm putting up there is that the information that I'm giving to you comes from all over the state of Texas. Those teachers that contacted me, then that network went out. And remember, they could not do it in the open. So I was getting phone calls late at night, emails. I collected letters for the commissioner, the State Board of Education. I forwarded them on. When I got them, most of them, they didn't want to have their names put to it. Again, I'm asking you to reinforce your local control and be informed of the local control. And you can do this basically by going to your school board members and say, we want a local curriculum review committee for CSCOPE or whatever comes after CSCOPE. Children are often blatantly truthful, like Sarah. I had playground duty, and I had a little girl, 3 of them in fact, whose parents were in the beauty salon business, and so they liked to hear news and that kind of stuff. Because of health reasons, kids couldn't do it to each other, so Miss Mack was the guinea pig. And I would bring up old makeup and old hair stuff of mine from home and put it in the center, and at recess time, to keep some of them busy, I'd let them do things. And so, sitting out on a picnic table, Sarah came, Miss Mack, we want to do a do for you. I said, okay. So there were 3 little girls behind me on the top of the picnic table, and I'm sitting there, at least I know where they are, watching the rest of the kids. All of a sudden, the 3 little kids behind me were quiet. If you've ever done anything with teaching or children, you know that when they get quiet, something's going on. So as I was debating what to do next and turn around and find out, and don't turn around, yes, turn around, don't turn around, here came Sarah. And she came around beside of me and up in my face like little kindergarten kids do, nose to nose. Generally they sneeze first, but nose to nose. And I said, Sarah. She said, Miss Mack. I said, yes, Sarah. What's going on? She said, Miss Mack, there's some gray hairs up here. It was Friday. I was tired. I said, okay, I'll play the customer. I said, what? I come to your beauty shop and I have gray hairs up there and I've got a meeting tonight. What are you going to do about it? And then I realized one of those statements you want to take back, because I could see the magic markers coming out next. And just as I was ranting and raving, they got quiet again, and I thought, oh, now I've stepped over the line. I've hurt the little feelings here. What am I going to do now? And about that time, here came Sarah back around, nose to nose again, and put her arm around me, because they want to really be loved and get the approval of teachers and parents. Miss Mack? Yes, Sarah. I love your gray hair, and I love your mustache, too. So if you fall asleep, you'll at least be watching my mouth the whole time. Okay, children are often blatantly truthful. CSCOPE people are blatantly untruthful. And I can say that honestly, because even if they're not saying a lie directly, they have been lying to us through omission. And to me, that is almost as bad or worse in doing that. From the beginning to the end, this is the common denominator for CSCOPE. Now again, I'm a researcher. I have to look for patterns. I have to look for what's out there that connects everything to everything. And then in scientific research, you want to rank that by degrees of influence. What is your first degree of influence that controls this particular study that you're doing? And the one thing that I found, there's a common denominator, are the superintendents. And it is their relationship also with their organization called TASA. Now, Texas Association of School Administrators represent school administrators. They do not represent your needs, your desires, your goals, or those of your children. Now, they can say they do indirectly, but they have a different objective, obviously, by what they have produced for us. The second one is this name, Linda Darling Hammond, and her connection with Obama's Common Core. And I say that because, and you'll hear rebuttal from this, that Ms. Mask must be misguided on this element, but I found her name constantly coming up in their training material and coming up through everything, and I said, okay, let me check her out. I looked up and found out, okay, she's got a school in California, Stanford University, looked into that, and then found out that her school was a charter school who happened not to be renewed because the students were failing and there were problems. So the school closed down, and as I understand it, Linda Darling Hammond is now the expert. Superintendents across the state of Texas, I have been going to listen to her. In fact, it was on the TSA website, I'm told, that she was the main speaker at the national convention of which your tax dollars sent superintendents to listen to. Her connection to Obama's Common Core is easy to find. You can Google both of those in. But what you may not know, and what is obviously not discussed, is the fact that CSCOPE, and in a regular time period between meetings that they had their bylaws in the corporation change. Now, I own a corporation, and I know what I have to do to get changes and file it and do all of that kind of stuff. So it's not an easy thing to do, and it's not something that you do, frivolously. It takes thought and planning. But they've changed their bylaws recently so that they can sell CSCOPE to the federal government. The other thing is that Ms. Mack must be misinformed about all of this talk about Marxism and humanism and socialism out there, because there's nothing in your Q&A about CSCOPE that talks about those things, so she must be misguided. But you will find this slide, and again, I'm trying to give you their material firsthand here. This is from theirs down the corner, one of their slides, and you'll see this in their training material over a period of years, and they list the same 12 people. And if you look into the background of the 12 people, you'll find a connection. And then that connection happens to be terminology, buzzwords that have to do with Common Core, that have to do with progressivism, that have to do with education equity. All of those kind of things are there. I took 3 when I did my report and said I don't have time to do all of them, even though I talked to 1, 2 personally. contacted another one, did the research on the background on their dissertation on another one. But I took Lev Vygotsky, Linda Darling Hammond, and Fenwick English and put together a quick review, and again, sourced the material, not my interpretation, as what was out there on those three. Lev Vygotsky, I think, died in the early 1900s, was a Marxist, and he's one of the ones that are connected to the theory of zone approximal development, which happens to talk a lot about collectivism in it. And he, I understand, was an atheist. Linda Darling Hammond, of course, again, I've already covered her. You go online, you can see where she's taken an oath to the Association for Humanists and to be good without God. She's also written a book about social justice. Fenwick English has written an article about the 10 worst enemies of education, and he will list all your conservative educators that are out there. He is considered a radical. Again, in varying degrees, but not all of them, but in varying degrees, you will have a connection to progressive education, which is a liberal approach, and you have that in your handout on the back side where you have the two columns, and you'll see characteristics of the one on the right that has to do with CSCOPE and collectivism and progressive education. Now, the teachers that were talking to me, parents, emailing me, calling me, I was keeping a tab on everybody. Even though I turned in letters anonymously to people, I said, if the commissioner calls me back, can I release your name? If the State Board of Education president wants your name, can I release it? Some said yes, some said no, but I kept a tally over what their concerns were, and as I looked into it, there were 7 areas of concern. My father always told me that when you do business, and he came from the time when you did business with a handshake, that before you did that handshake, that you made sure that you knew the value system of the person that you were doing business with. You check, where do they come from the same place you do as far as a value system? So that's what I did first, was to look into the ideology. And then as I was looking into that, I just kept stumbling across the covertness of it, the fact that what I saw in one place, I didn't see in another place, and then I had there was a lot of things there that were not out in the open. And the fact that the most common, I think the 2 common sales points to state school boards members, oh, by the way, people generally, parents, blame the State Board of Education for this, or they blame the governor for this, or they blame their local school board for this. But actually, the State Board of Education was not informed. Even your local school board, when they voted for this, was not informed of all about it. They were given 2 sales pitches. One, it will help with the STAR test. And number 2, it will address those kids who move from school to school to school. And we should feel sorry for those kids who move from school to school to school. So if we keep everybody on the same page at the same time, then we will help those kids move from one place fluently. The other was the legal structure, the finances, the illegal actions. I understand that there has been 12 that have been submitted to Attorney Abbott, 12 illegal actions, possible actions for an investigation. The quality and substance of material, that's what's gotten you here. You've gotten outraged about something that's in one of the lessons that doesn't fit with your value system. How dare they teach that to my child without my permission? That gets us going. The misrepresentation, did they ever tell you, or did they ever tell your school board members that this is based on a theory called social constructivism? And what does that mean? Inefficiency. They say it saves teachers time, but I know teachers tell me that they spend more time now than ever collecting materials because, again, this program, this computer program, does not provide the materials. It provides the teacher's instructions, some of the handouts that are involved in it, the material for the lesson, but when you have to gather stuff together, it takes a tremendous amount of time. So manpower is involved in here. The other thing is that they're saving you money because you don't have to do with textbooks. One teacher sent me one that in the early part of the year, she'd gotten a letter that already her principal was complaining about 600,000 copies already been made. So the copying cost. Now they've got a new computer company that's cleaning up and making CSCOPE look better, and there's more color involved in it. Have y'all gone to buy colored ink lately? Yeah, okay. And then the last one that I talk about is hurting students. This is where I step across the line from being objective and giving you everything and telling you my opinion on what this does, and it definitely hurts children in a number of ways. And I made that decision not to be objective anymore as far as my passion. And when I sat down with a small boy who was crying, and with the mother that was crying, and then within another week I had another parent crying. And then I heard about a child being taken to the doctor because of the stress level of having tests over material that they had not covered. So anything that hurts children, I'm against, whether it is your product, CSCOPE, or anything else. Definitely. We do not want that. And then I want to ask one question. Whenever should we have the word education and the word fear in the same room? Our teachers have been afraid to speak out about this for a long, long time. Parents have been afraid about it. Kids have been afraid about it. Fear and education do not belong in the same room. Here's the structure. Can you see the chart? I'm sorry. You see the small ones, kind of the shaded areas down in the bottom there? You have the 20 region centers, and they're supposed to be under the, not control, but the oversight of the commissioner. But the people go through their elected officials that come down through the legislature or through the governor, and the governor then appoints the commissioner, and then you have the control of the region centers that we have here. This is why it's called education without representation. Right now, even if you did not want CSCOPE and your school district has it, how do you get it out? Because your representative, the school board member, does not have control of CSCOPE. It voted to buy it, but it doesn't have control of what's in it or what can be taken out of it in doing that. So who controls CSCOPE is not the superintendent who's been hired by you. He has to answer to the region center up here, who then controls the product. Wait a minute. The region centers don't control it. The board members that are the region center directors of the board members of TSCCC control it. So see how many steps back from where you are to the person who has the switch up here to the person who's down here at the local level. The money, and I'm sorry that you can't see where all the money comes and goes as far as buying this. Do you see the little kind of a blue blob over there to the right and some yellow things? That's the thing that we're looking into right now, because they had their contract with their computer company on a handshake. There was no written contract. Millions of dollars exchanged. This company was run by one person in the suburb of New York State and doing that. CSCOPE is not just a management system. You'll hear from administrators say this is wonderful because it is a curriculum management system and there's nothing else there like that. And yes, as a superintendent or a principal, I would love this because it's fault-free on my part. The computer system is set up that I can check when teachers go in and out of a lesson. I know what they're doing. If they follow it like they're supposed to be doing it, then they have met all the objectives. So I don't have to read lesson plans anymore because they're following the CSCOPE verbatim. And I've done my job. But it's not just a management system. CSCOPE is a control system. And this is what I want you to get away from just for a brief moment. Not these controversial lessons so much. Because, oh yes, that does bother us, definitely. But step back from that, because any company can come in and buy CSCOPE and get some good writers, some good educators, some good editors, and they can rewrite the program, and they can put color into it. They can take out everything that you don't like about it within a short period of time. But what is the most marketable thing about this is not the lesson so much. It's the framework of control of 800 and I think 75 schools they've listed, 815 out of her 875. It's a control system. Now, yes, we'll have this oversight if this bill comes through, and we will be reviewing these lessons, which everybody's upset about. But that control system, remember, still is in place. And who has oversight of that control system? At this point, no one. So again, they can change all the lessons one day, and then whoever has their finger on the switch the next day can change it again. It controls the teachers, it controls the students' thoughts, it controls the truth, it controls the amount of parental, public input and influence. And the reason I say that is that it controls the teacher, of course, through the user agreement and through their monitoring, and then they have 3-minute walkthroughs. And when you list those things on how it controls teachers, you will have some administrators say, well, wait a minute, we don't do that in our district. We only use this part of it. And you'll hear that excuse, oh, well, we don't do that. You've heard that, but that's just a rumor. We don't do that part of it. Well, the whole bad thing about this is that step back, step back, step back. You had somebody develop this system with all of those parts needed for somebody's objective. It is education without representation. It was never designed for efficiency, accuracy, or integrity, and I can say that firsthand because I had a workshop at Temple ISD. A principal had hired me that had heard me about accelerated and learning, and I'd done 4 case studies on Hispanics, their natural affinity for mathematics, and had taken it to a national conference. So he hired me, and I went there and did the workshop, but between the time my contract was signed and then the time I showed up, they got a new superintendent who brought in CSCOPE. So they were required to honor my contract. I went in and they put 2 bilingual groups together for me, about 40 children. They could speak a little English, I could speak a little Spanish. We communicated within 30 minutes. They had memorized math facts. We had 11 of them using this mnemonic process that I'd developed for them. We were having fun. They did it. The kids took it back to their seats. And the teachers liked it. I came back 4 weeks later, which was a part of my contract, to follow up. I said, have you moved on to some other the stories, other facts? Are you reinforced? Tell me what's the pros and the cons of what I've shown you what to do. And they said, we're on the number 4. I said, what do you mean you're on the number 4? We just did 11 addition subtraction problems 4 weeks before, and that your kids had this down, and they were in a bilingual class. Well, we're on the number 4. You've got to explain that to me. In CSCOPE, they were allowing 1 number per week so that it took 20-some odd weeks to teach these kids to count to 20. And we did it in 1 day, both in English and in Spanish. So let's talk a little bit about the methodology, social constructivism, and that's on your handout in comparison. You use big words. People think that you must be smart, because I don't know what that word means, so the guy who's using it must be 2 steps ahead of me. But this is easily to explain. You know what social is, a group of people together. Constructivism, you know that. You're going to construct, you're going to put together. So the use of a group of people constructing or putting something together. Now this has been told to me by dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of teachers, that most of the lessons are put in social grouping settings. So that's one question you can ask your supervisors, and your superintendent, your principal, and please ask them with respect. Ask them and say, ask how many of the lessons my child have are in a social or group setting and how much are individualized or independent work. And they can give you that answer. But in social constructivism, as explained to me how this works from these teachers, that they put them in groups, and social constructivism, again, rooted in progressive education, there's no right answer. Okay. Now let me back up to my dad again and his faith in Christianity. As I was raised in the faith of Christianity, and other faiths may follow this suit too, that you have rights and you have wrongs. Thou shalt not, thou shalt do this, you shouldn't do this, and then you have a hierarchy of authority. We pray to our God who is above us and seek help that way. So you have a hierarchy of authority which we turn to, and you have distinct expectations of what is right and what is not, what is the truth and what is not. In social constructivism, there is no well-defined truth. And so any answer can be acceptable. Do y'all remember the term fuzzy math? Remember 2 plus 2, well, okay, you can put 4, but okay, you can put almost 5, or you can put bigger than 3. You can have those non-distinct absolute answers. And this is supposed to elevate the student from his perspective, that you first question your authority. Now let me back up on that. I am not selling textbooks. I've never been approached by textbook companies. I've been accused of that. Or have I approached textbook companies at all? But when you have a product that's out there, let's say it is McGraw-Hill, for example, or Macmillan, anyone that you have out there. They have a reputation, okay? They want the best product so they can sell their product. So they hire the best people in that field, historians for social studies. Then they write that material. Then they have the editing board to see and make sure that it's age appropriate, that it's worded correctly. Then they have people examine it and re-examine it, and the PR people to make sure that it doesn't step on other people's toes. Then they put that product out there in the public, and so we have public competition, so the other textbook companies are then evaluating it. Their competitors, their customers, our colleagues are all evaluating that material. So there is open scrutiny of it. With CSCOPE, there has never been open scrutiny of it. We do not know who wrote these lessons. They do have some names, and they'll refer to it back, well, that was written back when, back then. Well, give us the credentials of who wrote that. Well, they're teachers. This was written by teachers for teachers. How dare you say that this is not for the best thing in Texas, because our Texas teachers are great. They are. But I can tell you this, as a teacher, you're sometimes given a subject you don't know anything about, and you have to learn it right along with the student. So if I am not a historian, I have to rely on my vetted resource expert source, the textbook or ebook or whatever it is out there, that it has already been vetted by the public, and I am going to teach it. Then I have to do that, give that as that expert. If you remove the textbook, if you remove the resourced, vetted, expert-based material, then what is out there for the teacher and the student to pull from as that absolutes, what is a fact, what is not. In social constructivism, just to give you an example of how it works, Dr. Stovall came to Austin to give his testimony informally. He had 2 children, but he was talking about his 4th grade student. And Dr. Stovall is a dentist. So you tell me, how many years of education is that? 4 college and then 4 more, right? Before you become is that correct? It's a lot. In what areas? Math and science. So his 4th grade daughter comes in, and she's having trouble with math. There's no reference material, there's no textbook, there's no examples. So he takes the material up to school and he says, I need to help my daughter with this math because she's having problems, and explains the problem to the curriculum director. And the curriculum director gets up and goes out, and he thinks, oh, well, great, finally I'll get at least one of the textbooks out of the closet, and I'll have something to refer to, so I'll know how they're teaching this topic. The woman walks back into the room and hands Dr. Stovall 2 pamphlets for him to enroll in a remedial math course at the local college, junior college, so that he can help his child with math. An insult. Dr. Stovall then was at home another time, and he said that his daughter came in and he looked at her papers and he noticed that she had marked an answer that was wrong. And she knew this. We've gone over this before 100 times. So honey, come here. Said, yes, Dad. He said, look at this. He said, look at this question right here. And he tells it to her. He said, you know the answer? She said, yeah, it's this one right here. He said, but you marked this one here. She said, I know, but that we're required to mark the answer that the group comes up with. Social constructivism is about education equity, putting people in groups, that they will share the material and they will share knowledge and they will teach each other. That's the zone of proximal development. Collectivism. Now, let's go back to, let's say his daughter, Dr. Stovall, is a bright child. She's been stimulated outside of the classroom. And oh, by the way, research shows that in any school in the state of Texas across the United States, that your top 25% students bring information to the classroom. They do not rely upon the school as their only source of education, only source of facts or experiences. Your bottom 25% generally do. They will not get anything outside of the classroom. Top 25% does. So here, let's assume that she does get information from her stimulation of her father. She's put into a group, and then the subject is thrown out on the table. And this is the step first, and I've seen the workshop on this. Instead of giving basic facts of which to make your decided evaluation and to learn, you have your basic facts, then you come to conclusion, which is your evaluation, your top end of learning here. They start with the kids about throwing the subject out. Well, what do you think about this? This is called engagement. What do you know about this? What is your interest in this? Do you think? What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? And in doing that, they put the importance back on the individual, is that what I think comes before what the experts think. So the child then has to, within that group, through this process that they have of the 5 E's, which is older than the hills, and yet is still a theory, that you have these different steps that you take to engage, elaborate, and so forth, explain and extend, and everything that you have out there. You still have that group of 5 kids there in that group. Now, Dr. Stovall's daughter is, let's say, at the top, so she's brought information. She knows something about photosynthesis, so she's ready to talk about it. Well, the one at the bottom, or the 2 at the bottom, have never heard of that term before. But if this process works as well as they say it does, then they exchange the information. The children are in inquiry, discovery. Ask and discover. They're discovering together, and we'll do this together. And let's just say it works beautifully. What does Dr. Stovall's daughter get out of it if she is the one with the top information? Not anything. So when you can bring down your top as well as move up your bottom, where everybody has education equity, then we have a problem. And this was the one thing that I knew that I'd forget to tell you. But in collectivism, it sounds good because we're all in the same boat together. Let's work together for a common goal. That sounds great. And that's a part of socialism. We work together. We have the same, everybody gets the same, yeah. But just like Stewart and other people, you cannot be a hero. You cannot be a leader. You cannot be an inventor unless you step out beyond the group at all. Now, I want all kids to be heroes and inventors and leaders, but you will not find that in a collective group where the goal is education equity. Okay, because I was accused of making this up, there is their slide and their training. Constructivist theory of learning, and the lessons are designed on the 5E model. Also, they've been said, oh no, we've never said nothing bad about textbooks. Yes, we use textbooks too. CSCOPE, we're only using part of it, but we bring in textbooks too. We've never said that you shouldn't. Number 3, units of study free of commercial products or textbooks. Now, I testified twice before the Senate Education Committee, and I saw them lie repetitively in the first one. The second one, I was embarrassed for the superintendent who had to say what he had to say. But the reason I knew they were lying is because they asked a direct question, and I had the evidence in the notebook I was holding, even though I couldn't say anything, and I said, they lie in this. And when they said, oh, no, that's a local problem, that's not something we've done, and then the evidence came out. This is a teacher's report sent to me, and she said, Ms. Mack, if you tell your audiences something, tell them this. If you have a child in public school with CSCOPE, did you know that because of CSCOPE, your child wastes approximately 1 out of every 5 days, 2 cumulative months, years testing? Now remember, this system was sold for what purpose? To get ready for the STAR test. So if you're going to do that, you're going to give them a test. And then they sold it also the fact that the lessons were, had bundled TEKs to make sure that these new, more difficult TEKs were bundled together. And so when a lesson was done, it would be more efficient because they had bundled TEKs together to do the lesson. But what they didn't tell you is the people who wrote the lessons did not write the tests. So very often your CSCOPE lesson and your CSCOPE assessment test do not line up. So we were finding kids that were having trouble who were A students who are now making 70s. And because you can't, even if you're the brightest of the bright, do well on a test if you're tested on stuff you've never seen or heard. I observed this in one school board meeting where the arrogance of this man made fire come out of my eyes. But he stood up there and he said, I'm not a CSCOPE representative, and then he proceeded to give a PowerPoint presentation that came from the United Kingdom that was about as CSCOPE as it could be without the name. And he said, and you know who complains the most about this CSCOPE stuff? It's those A students. as if they were A. And then he was explaining the fact that for once we're making those A students go beyond regurgitation of facts. We're making them think for the first time. Because we're allowing them to do evaluation first before we come down to facts. And then we go back up. Now, my dad told me that if you evaluate somebody before you know the facts, then that is speculation, prejudice, whatever. If you don't have all of your facts in there before you get to that evaluation level, then you are ignorant on top of everything else. Under the oppression of CSCOPE, teachers are subjected to as many 3 unannounced walkthroughs a week, while administrators call best practices that lowers teachers' morale, and interprets the flow of instruction. I saw one superintendent from the Dallas-Fort Worth area. It was not Dallas or Fort Worth, but from that area. She sat down in testimony and said, CSCOPE's working fine for us. We have 1,700 teachers in our school district. We do 3 walkthroughs a week. Now, what's the math on that? 1,700 times 3 is 5,100. Did I get that right? 5,100 observations of which somebody has to write up the report and has to give feedback. The room is wrapped in red tape. And she was proud of that. The other thing is that, remember Sarah and the little girl that's quiet behind me with doing the hair? If you know kids when they're quiet, then you know what happens when a stranger comes into a classroom with some kids. What happens? You get them off task. If you have an ADHD child, it takes anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes to get them back on task in doing that. So one teacher said she looked up and there were 6 people in the back of her room with iPads to check whether or not she was doing their lesson. And then when you're doing the lesson, they're not checking to see if the teacher is teaching or the child so much is learning as the fact that they have a rubrics that is the teacher asking the right number of questions, the right kinds of questions. Are the students asking enough questions? Remember the inquiry discovery thing? And then you're ranking how many students, and I've seen them, the ranking on how many questions the child is asked. Then the teacher has to put that together in evaluation for the child and grade that child according to their participation in the group. And I'll tell you right now that that does not work. Common sense tells you it doesn't work. But Evan, a child of mine, was on the front row and doing some work with me, and he bothered me for the longest time because he was giving the wrong answer to whatever I was showing the class. We were going through factual information really fast, and everybody was giving the right answer. Evan was giving the wrong answer. And I think it was the orders of the president. I don't know. It was something that was in a chronological order as well as just the names. So whatever the group was doing, he was giving the wrong answer, and this child was sweet. He wouldn't do something intentionally to upset anybody. And then it took about the 3rd time before I looked at him, and then I realized this kid not only was figuring out what I was holding up in my hand to show the group, he was telling you the 2 presidents after that. We had him tested. Gifted and talented passive learner. He also doesn't talk much, and you can't get him to talk in a group. So how would he have been evaluated in social constructivism? Because of CSCOPE, teachers are abandoning high-quality lessons for time-wasting, cut-and-paste activities that dumb down the educational value of the lesson. We got to laughing the other night working on a report and finding out, one teacher was telling me that her favorite lesson, which is really sad, but we had to laugh, was that the one that was testified before the state senate, where you're learning about sedimentary rock. Have y'all heard this one? The lesson on sedimentary rock. Your tools or your equipment supplies that you need, which was down in the science closet, are ramen noodles. And the children are to take ramen noodles and rub them together until there's a sediment, and then this will teach them about sedimentary rock. And she said to the Senate Education Committee, we live in Texas. Step outside the door, pick up a rock. It was that simple for her. And we all laughed at that when she said that. And then she told me later on, she said, I didn't get to tell you the end of that, because they've already removed that lesson, by the way. She said, I noticed, and I went down to the principal's office and I said, have you been in the science supply cabinet room? She said, you've got a problem. And I said, no. So they walked down there, they opened the door, those ramen noodles, because they had to order a bunch for a lot of kids. They were mice infested for the whole school. We had to laugh. Due to the error-laden assessments, which do not match lessons in CSCOPE, students are routinely left feeling like failures. I've sent out emails to numerous educational psychologists to ask a question that you can answer me right here through common sense. What happens to anybody, adult or child, but in particular a child, if you give them a test repetitively where they know that they're going to have questions on it they've never been taught, that they know ahead of time that they're going to fail, that they're no longer being an A student, that they're going to make 70, or if they're 70 students, they're now making 30s in doing that. What happens to that child's motivation and drive? What happens to that child's love or dislike of learning? If you set up somebody to repetitively fail over and over, it can have long-term effects. Okay, let's get back to the scientific aspect of it. You can't see this. Ugly lady.
Good.
I think that's the name of the story here. I write children's books, and it took me a long time to bring hard concepts, because that's my research, is to take hard concepts down to elementary. I teach SAT words to pre-K students, and and so it's real hard to take something up here and bring it down to here, so I'm very well aware of what a first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth readability level is just by looking at it. So when I was given these lessons by the teachers, and I looked at that and said, something's wrong here. I said, this is not age appropriate. And so this was one of their pages from this year on one of their assessments that they had in reading. So it's 2012, 2013, English Language Arts, 4th grade. So we're at the 4th grade level, right? It's a story from an old book brought out about falling in love with a fish and turning it into a fish, which I kind of questioned that, objected to. But so you had this story. And so I did a readability test. Now, readability is what publishers do before they can sell the book to you. They can say this is a 2nd grade little booklet, or 3rd grade, 4th grade, so forth, out in public as well as in schools, so that you know that it's age appropriate or reading level appropriate. So the reading ability test on this is actually at the 6th grade level. And there's all the different reading tests on that. So the average, the Flesch Kincaid, which is probably the most popular, was at the 5th. So this material was already 1 year above level. Okay? Here is one for the 5th grade, same year. This piece of information, by the way, came from MSNBC. Their sources that they have sometimes come from very liberal-leaning sources. And sometimes that's revealed and sometimes it's not. But the readability test for this 5th grade was at the 9th grade level. So what happens to you if you're a 4th grade child who is just hanging on, and then you're given reading material that is way above you? What will happen? You will fail. What happens when you fail? You need more remediation. You need more help. The teacher's not doing the job. We need more training in this process of doing things. CSCOPE pushes an educational philosophy that makes teachers abandon direct instruction, leaving out geography, vocabulary development, cursive, spelling, grammar, systemic reading instruction, memorization of multiplication facts, and the skill practice needed for students to gain confidence. When I was at this first State Board of Education hearing, I was sitting down during a break. I'd already given my spiel, and I was talking to them about Anthony and Audric and the human brain and how God had given this potential for everybody to be successful. Why are we arguing about being down here when we could be up here? Anyway, this young teacher, everybody was mulling around the room. I was sitting down. Kim tapped me on the back. I turned around and said, Miss Mack, I need help. I said, okay. Your name and your school? Please, I don't want to tell you. She was afraid. And she said, my superintendent's in the room. I said, well, honey, you'll probably be taken out and shot for talking to me. But anyway, she asked me, said, how to do this. I said, okay, I have products. I can give you my competitors' products, and I can tell you how to develop your own products using the same principles. And you can do this, and you can get it done. Then I asked her, when can we do it here? No, they won't allow me. Well, do you have time right before lunch? No, they won't allow me. Well, how about just the breakdown time at the end of the day, you know, right before the bus comes? No, they won't allow me. And I said, well, let's give homework to it and have it at independence. No, they won't allow me. So everything that we came up with for her to help these 5th graders who did not know their basic math facts, they would not allow her up until the time. We came up with one idea, but I'm not telling you what it is because they probably won't allow her. CSCOPE philosophy constantly puts students into learning groups where young children are expected to teach each other, and teachers are told in the script any answer is acceptable. I think State Board of Education Chair Barbara Cargill just gave them one 2 weeks ago. I believe it was a third grade, but I'm not too sure. Third grade material. There were 19 questions on there after the lesson was taught. 19 questions for these little bitties to answer. Out of the 19, 13 of them, any answer will do. So if you have that kind of instruction, now the brain has to have feedback to it. This is the research. If you have going to accept something, there has to be repetition of the truth. And it has to be confirmed as it goes in so many times. It has to have feedback. This is correct or this is incorrect, and you change it. If you allow children to have incorrect information in the brain and they go to sleep, it will take 16 times for the brain to be ever erase one piece of false information. I'll say that again. 2 plus 2 is 5. The child miscounted. She writes it down. If she's not told within 2 hours, then the brain accepts it as true information. If she sleeps through it, true again. If she does not have that changed within that 2-hour period, it'll take 16 times that 2 plus 2 is 4 to erase the one time of 2 plus 2 is 5. So getting accurate information is very, very important. Getting feedback is very, very important. Having well-defined directives and expectations is important both to the young mind and the older mind. Examples of indoctrination. This is what gets us all stirred up in doing this. We do not like the idea that somebody is trying to change the way our children think or their value system. But I will tell you, and as I was telling Becca before here, I said, I will go to every one of these presentations. And by the way, I did not ask to come. I've spoken to a number across the state of Texas. They have come to me. I do not get paid for this. People help with the travel, and that's it. But I feel that this is a part of what my dad taught me. You need to have people ask questions to seek truth on their own. But in going out at every one of these, it's very invigorating because I have met the most incredible people in these groups. I've met the gentleman that gave Bill Gates his first job before he had Microsoft, and he lives here in Texas. I met some people that have worked on patents before for your cell phones, before we had cell phones. I met a lady the other day who lived in a car with 4 other siblings because they didn't have a home, and she had a single mom, and yet they made it, and now she's fighting CSCOPE because she made it. I met incredible people in doing this. But in the indoctrination of things and getting people upset and motivated into this, and if you go home and think, well, the State Board of Education, the Senate bill passed, the House bill passed, whew, they'll take care of it now, we can rest. It's not like that at all. This is only the tip of the iceberg as to what is happening in education. And again, I will ask you, ask for a local review committee of instructional material, whether the State Board does it, and the state has always done a great job, or anybody else. You decide for your children as a group, and it can be handled in a civil way. But here we go. Indoctrination. The Boston Tea Party, they've taken it down, supposedly. The one on Islam, reading the quotes from the Quran and the denial that this was ever there and then proven wrong, and what it is, it's been taken down. Do 5th graders have enough basic knowledge about tyrannical oppression and war to understand this question about the Second Amendment, which asks for 2 opposing views to the right to bear arms? Now, why would you ask a 5th grader 2 opposing views to the right to bear arms? This one is referring to Paul Revere as hiding illegal substance in his home. Now, one of the things that I've done over the years, from tabs to teams, I think it's tabs to teams to toss to tax, to STAR, that I have researched, and then I've researched ASCT and SAT prep on how test designers do testing material. And you have to realize that testing companies, before they can sell their test and stay in business, they cannot have all of the students make 100 on all the questions, right? Because it wouldn't be a viable test to resell. So they have to guarantee failure in a test. Now, they will tell you that they do this because they have these challenging questions, or they will raise the standards for the challenging questions for the kids. But they don't tell you how they hire people afterwards, that when a test question is written, that they hire people to find out what would be the most missed answer. and that kids would put, how would they miss this question? And they put those missed answers. If they place them in a certain way, certain kids will be drawn visually to the wrong answer if they're not analytical thinkers. There's also a process called forward thinking, reverse thinking in tests. I found one question, and I think this was in the test, I wished I knew what year it was. Seems like it was 2006, but I'm not too sure. A 6th grade math question that I sat there and it took 22 mental activities to get through the question. They had to juggle 22 pieces of information to get through the question. I rewrote it in 3 steps. And to do that. Now, did I cheat? No. It still did evaluate the TEKS. It was still TEKS aligned, but the question was from 22 activities down to 3. One of the schools in West Texas had a fire, and so I did a workshop to help them get ready for the tax back when, and I went in quick, and I had to, because they were out of school because half the town had burned down, and I had to get them motivated because they were depressed and a lot of other things. And so I said, okay guys, let's look at this like we would look at a computer game. And then I just asked them, I said, they were 10th graders, by the way, sophomores. I said, if Miss Mack decides to write this test and put 2 plus 2 is on your test, 2 plus 2 is what would you think? Well, that's silly. We would get that, of course. I said, watch. I took them through 5 steps of how to take 2 plus 2 is 4. And then I'd take them to each step. Can you still do it? Yes. Reverse thinking, frontward staking, always giving too much information, too little information, overburdens for the brain, and I got to the last one. And half of them told me I would have skipped that question. So any test designer can make a test difficult. And the thing about CSCOPE, and I'm hoping that the State Board of Education, and this comes out in, but I don't think it's planned this way. I think they're supposed to look over the lessons, help TESEC and CSCOPE correct the material. They basically are indirectly going to get a stamp of approval because we're helping them correct their material. And then they'll go back and they'll either make those corrections or they won't, or they'll do whatever that they want to. But they won't be looking at the tests. Now, CSCOPE tests are not sacred. The STAR test is because it's under lock and key and it's supposed to be, you know, standardized and objective and so forth. But the CSCOPE tests were written by CSCOPE people. But they won't let you look at them because they don't want that kind of, you know, it sounds bad if we look at it ahead of time. But I've had enough of them sent to me that there is a distinct pattern in it. The capital of Texas is, the most beautiful city in Texas is, one is an objective question, and one is a subjective or opinion question. It's easy to tell whether or not you know whether Austin is the capital or not. You get it wrong, I teach it to you with a map, visual, auditory, kinesthetic, I teach it to you. But if I ask you which one is the most beautiful city in Texas, then I have to convince you that, or I dislike you because you don't have the same opinion I do. A lot of the questions on CSCOPE tests and their material are subjective questions. Subjective questions are a form of indoctrination. When you ask which one is the most beautiful city in Texas, and I say Lake Jackson, Winters, El Paso, then I've not given you any of the other cities, have I? So you're limited to the 3 choices. And then I have defined in your mind that one of 3 of those are the most beautiful, whether they are or not. So there's ways to control the mind. It's called, in law, I think, it's fact without evidence. Mr. Smith beat his wife because she's too pretty, she spent too much money, she stepped on his foot. Whatever it is all of those, well, we all know she stepped on his foot, so he smacked her one. Sorry, Mr. Smith. But what the point is that Mr. Smith beat his wife was never established, so it's called a fact without evidence. And so we now already have a prejudice against Mr. Smith, even though he may be and is an innocent person. So the way questions are written are very important, as much as the material that gets us upset about it and how it pulls you into whatever answer that they want. This one, you cannot see it, is about the colonization of South America. I'm not Catholic, but if I was Catholic, I would be offended by this. In fact, I'm offended by it for Catholics because it talks about the pie graph there, and of course most of the people in South America are Catholic, But then it refers to the questions down here. What would be the negative results of this? So they pulled you into an opinion that Catholicism has to have some negative results. So a lot of these are subtle. This one, that going from capitalistic, you've seen this one, up to, what is it, communism? Okay. Actually, the factual material is not bad on there when you look at it, and the blue line is talking about more governmental control. But what is the subtle indoctrination? The person climbing the steps. They've removed this one too. And they removed this one too. Y'all have seen this one? Now that made, oh, but the reason I put this one up, even though they removed it, this was, I think, from this year. That darn ink cost a whole heck of a lot if I've got 100 students and I have to have this activity. And this was to create a symbol of flag for a socialist or communist. Why would you do that? Now, the argument is the fact that these have already been removed. In fact, when Barbara Cargill, I think she presented the committee 2 weeks ago with 40 problems, 40 lessons with problems in them. Some had slant, some had just factual material was error, some had misrepresentation, some had questionable this or questionable that, or good or bad. There were 40. And that same group of 40 lessons then were presented to a school in Texas. Here, these are the 40 that Ms. Cargill presented. And then the CSCOPE, pro-CSCOPE say, we no longer have those. So within a week, they pulled them all off. So when you complain about something and you get an answer like that, so don't worry, we've taken care of it. We've removed it, we've fixed it, it's gone, we now are moving forward. Let's get all together and work together for our children. Why in the heck were they there to begin with? This one is from the UN on zero population control, and then they're asking the student to be on a committee for that, to pretend that they're at the UN. Some people say this is similar to the Agenda 21. I have not studied that enough to make that correlation. I know that it's questionable. Oh, remember those 12 people that are experts? Out of those 12 people, you'll hear some of them talk about authentic learning. And they will use terminology, and if you don't have ownership of that terminology, then you don't have ownership of the argument. So anytime that you want to schmooze somebody, all you do is throw a 50-cent word in here, 50-cent word there, and if they can't define it, then you can intimidate them with that in doing it. But in doing this authentic learning and looking up it, do you remember you'll see it at the end here, the one at Lumberton? The one with the kids in the burqas. Y'all remember that? Okay. And doing it. That's called role-playing. Authentic learning, one of the definitions of authentic learning, is you can't understand the situation unless you get into that real, authentic lifestyle arena of things. And so they will put them into role-playing quite a bit. Now, that's dangerous. And we know it's dangerous. It's dangerous for us as adults when we do that. But we just saw the Boston Marathon people, right? And what's the first thing they were saying? That these are young kids, 19 or 26 years old, that have been indoctrinated. And so if those can be moved to that action, wouldn't it be easier for me to move or change the opinion of a 6-year-old? Here we have 25 days spent on population growth. Now, why in the heck would you have to have 25 days of something? I'll back up a little bit here. CSCOPE has been running into some problems. They sold this package out there, and they sold it at the very beginning with the fact that this is the solution. This is the only thing out there. We have the STAR test is coming, the TEKS are harder, everything's changing, technology's changing, we've got to move in, got to get this together, so forth and so on. Okay, so I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt that this stuff really works. It's the perfect solution. It's a cure for cancer. It's it. So if you have that there, then I, who have designed this and think that it's the cure, I'm not going to turn loose of the lessons, because that's what's all the bundled TEKS in. That's going to solve the problem. I'm not going to turn loose of the test, because that rigorous test is going to prepare that child for that STAR test. They have allowed some flexibility. And you'll hear superintendents say, oh, we don't do the 3-minute walkthroughs. Yes, we do use textbooks. Our teachers don't have to follow the lessons verbatim. Well, if they don't have to follow the lessons verbatim, where is their resourced expert material coming from? I like teachers, but they don't have time to go and find the latest expert on whatever and to bring it in the classroom to do that. and doing it. So when you have that, the one thing what is that they won't turn loose of. We're ranting and raving about the indoctrination, and they will clean that up. And they'll make sure it's not there. They've removed a lot of it already. And every time we complain and find a new one, it's gone. What is the one thing they will not turn loose of? Excuse me? Control through what's called their scope and sequence. They said, we will not turn loose. You can get everything, but you have to do the YAG, year at a glance. Scope and sequence, when it is taught. Now, I know good and well that my child can learn 2 + 2 is 4 at 2 o'clock in the morning if we're both awake and doing it at any time 24/7. When something is taught would be the least of my concerns if I had the cure for everything. I wouldn't turn loose on my lessons, and I wouldn't turn loose on my tests. I would definitely say, well, learn it when you can. As long as you get it taken care of before the STAR test comes in at the end of the year, I trust you. You can follow the calendar. But they won't turn loose of that. Why? Control. Because they dish this out every so many weeks, 6 weeks at a time or 9 weeks as I understand it. And so they have somebody waiting there who's dependent on them to give them the next lessons and doing it. Now, are these lessons great, good, in between? That's questionable. We can argue that over. But why would you have to have that being dispersed at the same time? When I saw that at the very beginning when they were talking about the YAG, the first thing that came up in my mind was mind control. I mean, did I miss something? Nobody else said that. I said, okay, this is like mind control. Because I know that God created us differently and we learn different at different times. Why in the heck would they want everybody on the same page at the same time? They keep saying that. The gentleman that testified that was 40 years of experience, 40 years, was on boards of textbook committees, a mathematician, great, brilliant mind, loved children, loved teaching, always had glorious reviews. He was hired to fix the math program before the new superintendent came in. The new superintendent came in and they reinforced CSCOPE. When CSCOPE was in, he said that his principal, who used to be his cohort and supporter, was there for him, went to CSCOPE training and came back an entirely different person. That no longer was that person flexible or helpful, but dictatorial, or how do you say that? Dictatorial. And that would not give way. And then within so many weeks, he had already been written up 4 times for not following CSCOPE steps. He didn't have the right page number on the board, I think, for one of them. So that was that super over the shoulder watching. 25 weeks on population control. And then you have to review, you have to, I think on that, you couldn't see it, you have to grow duckweed for a certain number of months, weeks in there. What did State Board Chairman Barbara Cargill bring up the Senate Hearing Committee? It was a lesson about the Declaration of Independence, the United States Constitution. Hooray! We're conservative. Yeah, let's get it in there. Basics. Let's get back to it. But in that same lesson that she had brought, that was up there, was questioning things about that lesson. And this is the insidious thing about this, that you can say this is TEKS aligned. Here's the title. This is what we're going to learn, and they'll pick out one little piece out of one little lesson, and that's what they will enforce or stretch out of in doing this. So, at the end of this lesson, you had an activity about freeing up Libya. Okay. There are others that are out there that are not aligned between the test and the test material. This is the one that you saw on national news about the young mother who is upset because of the question here. It depicts that the United States is at fault for 9/11, and she is saying that here. Then also they told her son that he marked it wrong because he thought it was the responsibility for food and shelter, not the government's. This is one I want to hurry and get to before I have to close up here. This one is already taken down, I understand, too. But it was, again, one of those that has all the TEKS, and they took one of the TEKS in one line and the one-word propaganda, and they are teaching the kids the different techniques of propaganda, and then they had the activity, oh, kids, yeah, you already use propaganda, and you use it when you go home and you have to tell your parents about a test that you really don't want to tell them that you failed. So what they're doing is they're instilling the fact that, yes, here are the techniques, yes, you're already doing it, not saying that it's right or wrong there, so you are leading kids into believing that propaganda could be used against their parents. How could all this happen and no one know about it? They divided, conquered, isolated, and gagged. They went around the state board and the commissioner. They didn't knock on those doors. They went to lawyers. Educators at Lode, they promoted it through their own organizations. School board members were promoted from the superintendents using fear and rose-colored glasses. Either the star is going to get us or those poor kids moving from school to school, we need to help them out. Teachers were gagged through the user agreement, through the 3-minute walkthrough and the computer monitoring. Then they had training at the very beginning on how to handle negativity, the resistance from their veteran teachers. They knew their veteran teachers would be giving them trouble, so they had training on that up front. They petitioned the Attorney General twice not to be required to reveal content of the product, many meetings or agenda to the public. And then what made the Senate Education Committee angry? They avoided questions. They couldn't tell who wrote this junk. They blamed it on old stuff, and they blamed it on local control, and then they lied. Is your objective to have a statewide curriculum? Oh, no, we wouldn't do that. But then there we had the next person who has a statewide curriculum with the intention of leveling the playing field. What about your user agreement? Are you trying to control teachers? Well, perhaps our wording could have been better. No, that's a local control thing. But then in their copyrighted materials, it says individual teachers do not have the option. Oops, they broke the law. Plagiarism. And I heard this 3 years ago. Teachers were telling me, I've seen these lessons somewhere before. And I said, well, if you can prove it, send it to me. And so I had 5 cases of plagiarism that I took to the Senate Education Committee that has been now turned over to the Attorney General. What about the academic results? Average is 36.67% higher unsatisfactory rate among CSCOPE test students than on all tests. Okay, CSCOPE kids have a higher rate than non-CSCOPE kids, and this was done by a business class of over 950 Texas ISDs surveyed in doing this. So kids looking into it themselves have come up with the fact. Now you can say, well, there's some CSCOPE schools out there that are doing fine. If you go in and list the exemplary CSCOPE schools out there and run it by the top schools in there, the majority of them do not use CSCOPE, but the ones that do, if you then investigate there, they ran parallel with CSCOPE, a tutorial direct instruction program. So those at-risk kids were being pulled in before school, at noon, and after school, and with extra bus runs to make sure those kids' needs were met. And they were given credit to CSCOPE. Now, when you get your results from the school and say, oh, look, we are doing better, do not trust facts until you look at the raw data. Now, if you look at your independent school district here, it wasn't bad when I was looking at the results compared to the host state. Hey, so this is not bad. They're coming from an area that's the kids are doing better than average. In fact, I think all of your kids here passed the geometry end of course test during this time period. But so did most of the kids in Texas. And then you look at why. That's because I think they only had to make a 38 to pass. What about the money? Well, there's a lot of it there. I just suggest you ask for how much that your school is going to be or has paid on this. But this is more important to you, especially when you say, no, our school doesn't have CSCOPE. Your school, though, supports CSCOPE when it pays or has your superintendents pay their dues to TASA and your dues to TASB, which is your tax dollar money paid to them. Here were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 schools, and this was done on a quick review here, and just those few schools there were paying $1,200,000 and some odd to TASA. By estimates, TASA gets $90 million of your tax dollars every year to dictate the policy of what we're doing through their superintendents. And then this one from my West Texas town, they were even paying for workman's comp on their TASA dues. In conclusion, we need to quote Senator Dan Patrick. This is a big mess. So I'm going to go through this. And this update is our new thing. This is the latest thing that they've done by listing. Well, they made what they consider false claims against them out there from people who are looking into it, that there's a connection between CSCOPE and William Bill Ayers. Well, CSCOPE's connection to Linda Darling Hammond, and Linda Darling Hammond is connected to Bill Ayers. You can go online and Google that one and doing it. So they're going to rebut all of these things. And then one of the issues they have here is that teachers are going in and getting the tests for their own children and giving it to them because so many people are failing. The other thing is that they've picked out 3 people and they have listed them across the state of Texas. Oh, by the way, that's called witness retaliation, and it's illegal. It's 2 to 10. Then you had this in Lumberton here, and again, that's role playing. So let's eliminate the mess. Let's elevate our children like Stephen. And I will end with this. Stephen was kicked out of another kindergarten school before he was brought to me. And then he stayed with me a number of years. He has a problem, learning problems, behavioral problems. And I told his mother he needs to go somewhere else, so they took him somewhere, and then they got kicked out there, so he had to come back to me again. So he comes in, and he was my student when Bill Clinton was president, and he liked Bill Clinton. He's a nice guy. And his parents, staunch conservatives, and Stephen's kind of a staunch liberal. And so he comes in, he said, I'm going to write Bill Clinton a letter and tell him that even though he's doing some things wrong, that I like him, he's my friend. I said, well, Stephen, that'd be really nice. He said, but I'm going to research it, Miss Mack, like you told us. I said, go for it, Stephen. So Stephen researched it, and he came back with his letter the next week, and his mother made a copy of it, so we do have proof of this. And he's written to Bill Clinton, Dear President Clinton, I am your friend. I know you've had a rough time. And I know you made a few mistakes. Here they are. Number one, he lists 25 mistakes that Bill Clinton's done. I would tell you one of the other things that he said in that letter, but I can't because there's young ears in the room, but he even found a piece of information that I thought was astounding. Your friend, Stephen. And, of course, we didn't hear back, so there we go. Okay, contact everybody. Go to CSCOPE Review or go to what's called onpointbroadcasting.com, has some testimony. Dan Patrick, Steve Toth, anybody, call your local representatives, get a three-prong approach and do it repetitively. Like I say, the three-prong approach, and empower everybody for effective action in it. This will not go away if you've got a superintendent and a block of school board members, because they actually can control it. So you have a superintendent who wants it and a block of school board members, and I've seen two districts who the parents have been fighting it for 2.5 years, trying to get it out, and doing it in a logical, reasonable, well-mannered way. And yet they have a superintendent with a block of school board members who will not turn loose of it. And you say, why is that? There has to be a reason for that. So ask your principal and superintendent, and do it respectfully. Are you a supporter of progressive education? Explain to me what collectivism is and what individual merit, why that would not be better. Ask what social constructivism is. Please, Ms. Mack mentioned that. I don't know what the heck it is. Tell it to me. Please explain what the pros and cons of it. And then ask them, what paper do I sign to opt out of CSCOPE for my child, and to obtain direct instruction with vetted, expert-based resource material. I want the best for my child in doing it. So the quote of the month is not there anymore, but it's the one that has to do with linen. Give your children to me for 4 years, and I will have imprinted them for life. Thank you very much.